cast. Today I only have Ryan with me.
What's up, everybody?
And today, a bit of a last minute idea we put together, but we thought it would be a good video to do. We're going to be forecasting the 2023 offseason. We have all 32 teams lined up. We're going to go through what the roster is right now, their cap situation, and what we think they should do when free agency opens up tomorrow. And as well at the end, Ryan and I have our roster projections for both the Oilers and the Leafs. And that's really it. Let's just get right into it.
Yeah, so this obviously it took us a good 3-4 hours to get
Yeah.
everything set up. So if you guys like the video, make sure to click the like button and subscribe. But going on to our first team, we have the Anaheim Ducks. This team is obviously super interesting. They're rebuilding. They got the most cap space in the NHL. We're not keeping LTIR in mind right now because the NHL rules are, if you have to be cap compliant before the start of the season. So it doesn't matter if you have guys on LTIR because you have to get under the threshold before the season starts. Um, so I'm gonna just go quickly over the two big names, which is Zegras and Terry. Those guys have to come back, right? And Me and Shay discussed it, and we agreed for Zegras that he's gonna get the Jack Hughes contract, and he hasn't proven what Jack Hughes has, but like he is so important to that team that I think they're just gonna have to pay him, and they're gonna go long term with him. And then Terry's been very productive for them as well. I think he's 25 years old, so they're gonna go 8 years. He's a good player. Anaheim doesn't have a lot of those.
Yeah.
He's in his prime, and so they're gonna extend him as well. So that's gonna take a decent chunk out of their cap space.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. You have these two core players that you have to lock up, and they will get them locked up. You know, yeah, and obviously that's at 39 million in cap space as you see there. And we think they do something similar to last year where they signed John Klingberg to a 1 year deal and then flipped them at the deadline. They signed Ryan Strome to a 5 year deal. That's more of a stopgap player. Yeah, I think they do the same thing this year. As you see, some options we listed as 1 year rentals. Eric Gustafson is basically a left hand version of John Klingberg, but probably better. Um, Sherry, Kerfoot, Tatar, kind of similar in the Ryan Strome range. An underrated guy we put here is Matthew Dumba. As you see there, the right side in Anaheim is very, very young. So they get an experienced veteran on that right side that can maybe help, Drysdale's development, Helson's development. And obviously, for us, I think the biggest one is Trey Gibson. Obviously, he's been there his whole career. He wants to win at some point. And I do think it's time to give Lucas Ostol the reins as a starter. Um, Something we didn't put here, which I think the Ducks might do, is maybe bring up Leo Carlson to start the year.
Hmm.
They did that with McTavish and send him back down. Um, I wouldn't do that. I would let Carlson spend a year in Sweden or spend a year in the AHL wherever he is. But just for Anaheim is just that rebuild path, sign stopgap players, rental players, sell them at the deadline for more assets.
Yeah, and I think I think the earlier that they trade Gibson, the better.
Yeah,
Because there's so many like Demko, Hellebuyck are both guys whose names are swirling around. Tristan, there's a lot of options in free agency. Frederick Anderson, Tristan Jari. Um, I think the good thing with Gibson is that I'm not sure how many years he has left. I think he might have like four years left on his deal. But if Anaheim was willing to retain to make his salary a bit more competitive, I think there's a lot of teams that still view John Gibson as one of the best goalies in hockey, and so I think Anaheim could get some premium assets. Um, then again, his production the last 2 3 years hasn't been great, but how much of that is because he's played behind statistically probably the worst defense in hockey the last 2 years, and how much of it is regression on his part? Well, I mean that's a risk that a team acquiring him would have, right? But I think
yeah,
it's better to get rid of him sooner than later because you don't want to be stuck 3 years from now when Dostal is ready and maybe Callie Klang is trying to knock on the door on being an NHL player and you can't bring those both of those guys up because John Gibson's $6.4 million is eating up your books, and so you can't afford to send him down or bench him, right? You gotta play him, and then now there aren't teams that are willing to trade for him because now he's too old. And maybe if he has 4 or 5 bad years in a row, then teams are like, Gibson's just washed. He's not worth trading for, especially at that cap hit. So I think this season is probably the right time to move on.
I agree. Next up, we got Arizona. We're gonna try to get some teams done in like 2 minutes or so because this is gonna be a very long video.
Yeah.
Arizona, as you see, has the third most cap space this off season. Um, we have 2 spots blank on their forward core. And for us, the main priority is to get Matias Maccelli done. I don't think he was a finalist for the Calder. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a mistake because he was very, very good this year. I think he was actually first in points per game among rookies. So that's something. They need to upgrade the 2C spot. I don't think. I mean, Travis Boyd is obviously not a second line center. Hell, he's probably not even the third line center. So for the Coyotes, who are apparently they're trying to compete next year, they should probably upgrade the 2C, give Dylan Gunfer and Machelli a proper center to work with. We mentioned Matt Dumba again, the right side there. Very, very young, very, very inexperienced. So Matt Dumba, once again, could be an option for Arizona. Or even some depth defensemen like Ethan Bear, Caleb Jones, 2 younger guys who can grow this Coyotes team. Maybe a better like Nick Holden and Dimitri Kulikov sign into a 1-year deal. Obviously you can put them at the deadline for like a third or fourth round pick. A lot of very interesting options for Arizona, and I do wonder how they're going to get to the cap floor because apparently they're not taking any more bad contracts on. So just I don't know how they're going to get to the cap floor.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part is just, they're in a position where they can pay more for a guy like Dumba or Duchesne. And they have to because these players might not necessarily want to play. That's why I think Evan Rodriguez is really interesting. He's had really productive seasons, but he hasn't been paid for them quite yet. And that might be because contenders don't view him as someone who, deserves $4 million a year. But, on Arizona, he might, right? And, signing contracts like that, good players in their middle six that can help their young guys, so they don't get shelled and caved in every night, because that's not good for development either, right?
Nope.
That might be a direction to help them reach that cap floor.
Yeah, I agree. That's about it for Arizona. Kind of basic, kind of what they've been doing every year.
Yeah.
Boston, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. They have 12.6 to work with. It says 13.6 in cap friendly, but we know Lucic is signing a contract with the Bruins tomorrow, so we just estimated about around 1 million to make our lives easier.
Yeah.
Obviously, the first things first, you have to convince Krejci and Bergeron to come back because those are 2 very important pieces for Boston. That's your 1 and 2C, right? And
Yeah.
I know Zaka had a very good year, but he's not a 1C, and Coyle is definitely not a 2C.
He's a 3C. He's a very good 3C, but
Yeah,
no, if he's your 2C, you're in big trouble.
yeah, and obviously, if you can't sign both of them, or you can't even sign one of them, you have to replace one of them. Guys like Matt Duchene, who just became available, makes some sense. JT Compher makes some sense. Blake Wheeler, who will be very cheap. He's a veteran. He wants to win. He's played in Boston before. That fit could make sense. Max Domi fits the Bruins mold. Obviously, they will try to bring back Tyler Bertuzzi. I don't know if they will. And maybe some cheaper options if they're still in the market, Tatar and Zucker. It's going to be very hard for the Bruins to compete next season after everyone that's left this year. Um, they have to make sure that they can sign at least one of these guys early on because if you're waiting on an answer for Bergeron or Krejci and you're in August, most of these guys are going to be gone. So you're going to need to try to plan something up quickly.
Yeah, I mean for sure. I think on top of that, I think the two guys that you have to make a priority as well are Swayman and Frederick, right? I
Yeah,
mean, Boston doesn't have a lot of great prospects, and so that makes it even more important to keep the younger guys on their team that have developed, right? And Frederick may not be the guy who will give you like 50 points a season, but he's an NHL, he's a proven NHLer, and he fits the Boston's play style. So you want to give him, that contract. You want to keep him around, and Swayman as well. But the question then comes, that's $6 million right there. That's half your cap space, and and that's with the current roster that we have here on the left. Greer as your second line left wing, Beecher, Steen, and McLaughlin actually being regular NHLers, that's not sustainable. And in the event where Bergeron and Krejci don't come back and you spend like say $4 or $5 million on JT Compher, right? That's not enough. You have to make improvements elsewhere, and that's why it's really important that they move on from either Coyle or Forbert because
Yeah,
in the long run, and maybe even Allmark, which is something we didn't write here, right? Because he just won the Vezina. It seems kind of crazy, but to clear up cap space to improve that forward core and get depth scoring to replace Bergeron and Krejci, that might be a sacrifice they have to make.
yeah, and I wonder what the price for Omar will be. There's teams looking for goalies, as we'll get to a bit later. Like you said, that'd be very, very interesting for Boston to consider. Next up, we got Buffalo. I don't think Buffalo has to do much, as you see on the list here. It's just basically get a defenseman and basically get a backup goalie for Devin Levi. You've heard Brett Pesce's name around. He's from the New York area. Dmitry Orlov could make sense. Scott Mayfield on that right side to push down Yuki Haru would make sense. And obviously, to back up or to at least tandem with Devin Levi, we listed Talbot, Corpus Sal Thompson, but I think any goalie would actually kind of work here.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be a super good goalie. You don't want to invest a lot of money into a backup because you're hoping that's what Levi can become. But at the same time, with young goalies, there's fluctuations, right? There's consistency issues. And Levi looked incredible for Buffalo at the end of last season when he came over from the college. But if you're Buffalo and you want to make a legitimate run for the playoffs next season in a loaded Atlantic division, it's not a bad idea to have a veteran backup who's capable of playing 45, 50 games a season if Levi's play is not up to scratch. And that's not anything against Levi. It's just he's young and he's unproven.
Yeah,
But yeah, this is
definitely,
definitely a team that could make the playoffs next year. I'm very scared.
100%. Yeah. Next up, Calgary, 2.4 million in cap space. It's gonna be an interesting offseason for Calgary. Obviously, last year they lost Gaudreau and Kachuk, and they got a lot of big UFAs next year. So they obviously don't want something similar to happen. So obviously the biggest thing is extend the UFAs or move them. And if they're extended, we have their what we project their contracts to be. We're not going to read them all, just to save time. But yeah, Calgary needs to sort out their UFA situation first things first this year. If a lot of them can't get extended, you probably look to start to rebuild. If you can get a lot of them extended, you probably have to start competing. But like this team is old. Obviously, a lot of money's gonna be tied up in veterans, and they're also tied up in guys like Kadri and Huberto and Mangiapane already. Um,
Coleman, although I
Coleman as
bet,
well.
although they probably wish they don't, they didn't.
I know, right? They probably have to trade Vildarig now because they have Wolfray for the backup, and as as we put here, you have to get Markstrom's game going.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what you do. You take him to an Aaron Rodgers retreat. Bring in a voodoo magic person, right? Do something because you're paying him $6 million. No team is gonna touch that contract. Like you have to attach like Coronado, Pelche, Zari, and like 2 first-round picks for someone to take that deal in its entirety with how Markstrom's playing. But if you want to compete, you need him to play at that caliber that he was with Vancouver, and so you gotta figure out how to get him going. Otherwise, like if we're being honest, I think the decision on whether to rebuild or to compete will be made. Right? It doesn't matter how good of a team you put in front of Markstrom if he's not going to perform. Right? You can't outrun a bad goalie.
I agree. That's it for Calgary. Basically, just uh, get your shit together.
Yeah.
Number seven, we got Carolina. Um, you know, we know that D'Angelo will be a Hurricane in the next week or so, but technically he's not on the roster right now. So right now he's in the other category. But Carolina, the biggest thing they need is a finisher because as much as their forward core looks stacked, a lot of them can't really put the puck in the net. So you should need to bring in a finisher, maybe to bring back Pacioretty. Tarasenko's up there. Maybe they bring back Max Domi. Kessel on like a 1 year, $1 million deal. Daniel Sprong got released. They have to bring back Brett Pesce, who's their main shutdown guy. Need to find a goalie for Kochetkov. There's been rumors about Anderson coming back. Also been rumors about Jack Gurley on the move, and if so, DeBrincat would make a lot of sense because he's that top six high end finisher that they need. Carolina's usually makes a lot of noise in the offseason, so I'm expecting a big splash for them in the next couple of days here.
And they kind of need to make that splash. I mean, what is that? The two sweeps in the conference finals. Like, you gotta make a move to get over that hump. It's not a good look right now.
Yeah, and we'll see what they do. They got some of the smartest management in the world, so I'm sure they'll be fine. And yeah, it'll be interesting. That's really it for
Yeah,
them.
for sure.
Chicago, basically you have to continue to rebuild. Got a good first line with Hall, Bedard, and Reichel. The rest of the lineup it's not great. Put it that way. Um,
Especially
you
that blue line.
yeah, you probably need a backup goalie to back up Mrazek.
And it's not
Uh,
even the backup. It's just another guy.
just another guy, right?
Yeah.
Murray makes sense. Kakinen, Campbell, although you're probably getting like a first and something else from Edmonton in that deal. You probably have to sign more free agents to lucrative deals like you did with Perry and Foligno, and then you ship them off at the deadline, which is actually smart because
Yeah.
although I think at 50% retained it would be 2 million, it would force a team to get a third party broker, and then you get more assets in the end. So it's actually kind of smart. And that defense is not good to say the least as well.
Yeah.
Jared Tenorti is probably an AHL top pair guy, and he's on your NHL roster. So you need a left-hand defenseman. Gosper makes a lot of sense in my opinion. He can drive up his numbers on that power play with Hall and Bedard. That would be a good fit for Gosper. Ekman Larson would make a lot of sense. You put
Similar.
Simon Benoit, but
Um, I think it just makes sense because he's only 24 years old. Didn't get a qualifying offer from Anaheim, probably because they've got so many young defensemen that they eventually want to see in the NHL over the next 2 or 3 years on that left side. But he played like almost 20 minutes a game for them last season, right? Those are top 4 minutes, and no, Anaheim weren't great, but he was decent defensively relative to his teammates on a really bad team, and I think he can play a similar role on Chicago, who's defensive prospects aren't nearly as NHL ready, I think, as the Ducks are. And you can bring him in here on a 2 3 year deal. He's a guy who's 24, will only be 27 by the time that contract ends, and he'll be able to just give you really solid minutes while still being kind of young and have some upside.
yeah,
And it's better than Kaiser and Vlasic on the left side, all right, and
way
Tenori.
better, right?
You sign Benoit, he's your first pair lefty. And I mean, to be fair, that's not saying much, but I think it's a worthwhile gamble. But yeah, Chicago is just continue what they're doing. Kyle Davidson knows what he's doing.
Yeah,
Smart GM, so we'll see how that goes. Colorado, Stanley Cup champs 2 years ago. I mean, for me, the big thing is you gotta bring back Byram and Colton, right? On a team that's also slowly starting to age a bit, right? You gotta sign the young guys, right? And also, Colorado's given up a lot of prospects away, well, in the HUD, right? Helleson to get Manson from Anaheim, and so on and so forth. So, Colton, they're going to extend him, Bowen Byram. So that will be around $7.5 million. And now it's just about finding another high upside, but, maybe low floor middle six winger who hasn't quite worked out on a couple of teams that maybe you can get for that, $1 million range. And we have a couple of those guys here. Engvall is probably a bit out of their price range unless they can move a contract out, but I think his play style fits really well with Colorado. And then
yeah,
Shea obviously brought up Yamamoto and Gurianov and Sprong. Those are guys who can, at their peak was probably around like a 40, 50 point pace players that could bring, a shock of offense to that middle six. And then Sundqvist is just like, he's a nasty player. He hits, and there's always space for those kinds of guys on a Stanley Cup contender.
yeah. Yeah, you pretty much nailed it all. This is still going to be a very, very good team this upcoming season. Obviously, not as deep as they were 2 years ago, but um, yeah, they're definitely going to be one of the favorites coming into the Western Conference. Columbus, um, not much to do. Just trade Peak and Bean. There's so much depth on this team. Um, yeah, like look at their roster and then look at their scratch players. And then they don't really have much cap space to work with. They basically got their offseason done when they grabbed up Provorov and Severson. Um, yeah, it's just sticking to the young gun plan. Hopefully the rookies progress. Um, I mean, they have Mike Babcock, so we'll see how that goes.
And with that depth in mind, Corrali and Jenner could be interesting trade deadline options.
Oh, for sure.
Jenner's only making like 3.5 or $3.8 million retention, could net you a good piece. Corrali's like the Nola Chari, right?
Yeah.
So very interesting to see what Columbus does at the deadline. If I guess it depends on how successful the Provorov Severson thing was. If, can they compete for a playoff spot? Because if they are, then Jenner and Corrali probably stay put, right?
100%. Yeah. Dallas is up next. Um, not a lot to do for Dallas. Extend Ty DeAndre had a pretty good year. I think he had around 28 points in 82 games this year. And
Yeah.
obviously, Max Domi was a great fit there, but he's heading to free agency, so you probably want to replace him. Yamamoto's a new name on the list we haven't talked about, but and also JVR and Engvall, but everyone else we kind of briefly touched on. It's gonna be quiet for Dallas, only 5 million, and I mean that's exactly enough to get all these guys done, right? Yamamoto will probably be like 1.5, Sprong 1.5, Sunquist maybe 2. It'll be cheap argument hunting for Dallas. Um, I think they're fine with that. This is still a pretty good team. You might want to upgrade the defense at the deadline, but not really much here for Dallas to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think I my pick would be Kerfoot, and that's not because I don't want him back in Toronto, not at all. That's not why I'm projecting him at Dallas. Don't worry about it.
All right, Detroit up next. Do you want to touch on Detroit? Because I think you have a lot to
Yeah.
say.
I mean, Detroit is just super interesting. I mean, Valeno will be back. He's been fairly productive. No reason not to bring him back. He probably won't be that expensive. Um, Although now, I've heard from Detroit fans that Casper is probably going to make the jump to the NHL next season. He is a pretty high floor prospect, so that makes sense. But they gotta get someone better than Ben Sherratt to play with Edmondson. I'm sorry. I know they paid him a lot of money. I know Stevie Y thinks he's great. I know he went to the Cup Finals with Montreal. He is going to ruin Simone Edmondson if you play him next to him for 82 games. All right, that's what happened to Sider. They brought him in to play with Sider, and then he played so badly that they eventually were like, you know what? Let's put Sider up with Wallman and put Hronik with Sherratt to kind of fix Sider. And then Sider immediately improved. And everyone was like, oh my God, it wasn't a sophomore slump. He just sucked because he played with Sherratt. So, guys like Scott Mayfield, Connor Clifton, Shattenkirk, all available. I mean, Shattenkirk and Clifton probably aren't top four caliber defensemen, but I think they're better than Sherratt. So, for a cheap contract, you can bring them in. They can play spot minutes. Give McIsaac some more time to develop. And there are rumors about this. I think Ciravelli was one who put these rumors out there. Please, for the love of God, Detroit, do not sign Ryan O'Reilly and Alex Killorn to mega deals. It doesn't make sense. You're going to be stunting these young guys that are trying to come up and make a spot for themselves on this team. And like, how much are you going to pay like Ryan O'Reilly and Alex Killorn? Like Ryan O'Reilly's on the wrong side of 30. He just had a broken foot, right? He had worst year of his career. Are you really going to pay him like $6 million to what? Be your second line center? Then what happens to Andrew Copp? You're going to play him on the third line while you're paying him like $5.5 million. And Alex Killorn, what is he going to do? Putting him in that top nine just means one of Casper or Soderblom get kicked out, right? And with one of them get kicked down to the fourth line, not only are you stunting their development, that means a guy like Zadina or Berggren probably won't be able to make the NHL roster at all. And I guess Zadina is the odd man out, but you invested a very high pick in him, and you probably want to see him do well. So it's like, if you want to trade him, you want to boost his trade value. You don't want to just give him away for nothing, right? So it just doesn't make sense to me. And I know Stevie Y kind of wants to surround veterans around this team and a winning culture, but don't do it at the expense of the actual prospects' playing time. And then obviously we know how bad the goalie situation has been. They brought in Ned after he was good in Carolina, and then he was trash. They brought in Huso from St. Louis because he was good in St. Louis, and he's trash. You gotta find an actual capable goalie if you're really serious about contending in a loaded Atlantic division. We brought up Talbot. He's gonna be a name that shows up a lot, and Ranta. Those two guys, veterans, have proven to be successful. Issue is health. They can't stay healthy. And I could say the same about Corpusalo, to be honest. He's also dealt with injuries. But at least those guys, if they are playing, they're going to be pretty good for you and pretty consistent. And I think that's what they need in net right now. Too much wild inconsistency from their goalies.
Yeah, you pretty much hit the everything on the head. We can just go on to the Oilers now. For the Oilers, it's tough. Only 7 million cap spaces, but they do have to re-sign McLeod and Bouchard. So for some things to consider, sign a cheap top six forward. They need help in the top six, especially with trading Yamamoto, who's now bought out. I'm 90% sure Connor Brown's an Oiler. It's been rumored for like the past 4 months about a bonus laden deal. He was almost an Oiler last year. I'm pretty sure there was bending for Brown talks like 4 years ago in Toronto. So it's been a long time in the making, but I'm pretty sure tomorrow Connor Brown, when I wake up, will be an Edmonton Oiler. If not, Thomas Tatar is someone else I would consider. Obviously, he knows Ken Holland from Detroit. Had a good year in New Jersey. Played great in the top six of Montreal. Um, Obviously, re-signed McLeod and Bouchard to bridge deals. Another thing is to find some cheap depth players that can provide depth scoring. Tyson Joe, Sam Steele come to mind. Two Alberta boys, actually, who both went unqualified today. So we mentioned Daniel Sprungo Lotto already. Teddy Bluger kind of makes sense as like a depth 13, 12 forward. Danton Heinen maybe later in free agency if he doesn't have a contract, he can take a 1 year cheap deal. Comtois when unqualified. He's more of a project at this point. But for the Oilers, it's probably going to be running back the same team. Um, it makes sense. You don't have a lot of cap space to work with. Probably at the deadline, that's when you make your major transaction on the defense, probably replacing Cody Ceci. But yeah, it's gonna be quiet for the Oilers, and it's still a good team. They're still one of the best in the West.
Yeah, no, I agree for sure. Not much to add there to the Oilers fan. So
Yeah,
I guess we'll move on to Florida. Um, and I think the big thing that we both agreed on is with Ekblad and Montour's injury, those are their two arguably best defensemen, although Ekblad's kind of trash. And so you got to get at least one replacement. And whether or not it's two maybe slightly cheaper guys like a Mayfield plus Justin Hall, can I interest you in Justin Hall? Or a bigger name like Orlov, Graves, or maybe trading for Hannafin or Sanheim. You gotta get someone in there, really stabilize that situation. And obviously they're having a tough time with the cap, but 10 million. But there's rumors they might have to move to Claire. Um, and they didn't end up qualifying Colin White, who was just okay for them. So not too much of a loss there, but emphasis for Florida this offseason, definitely the blue line. Definitely the blue
yeah.
line.
Hannafin makes a lot of sense. There's been talks about a Duclair Hannafin swap, and if that's the case, that's a huge win for Florida. I love Duclair, but Hannafin's a legit. He's an elite second pair defenseman, maybe a low end first pair guy.
Yeah.
But Sanheim's of course name has been shopped around. I really like Dmitry Orlov for Florida, and they do have the cap space for him. And
Yeah.
no taxes in Florida. It's nice weather. I think that could be an actual good option there as well.
For
And yeah,
sure.
you touched on it. This team probably, I would say they make the playoffs if they add a top four defenseman again.
Yeah.
Do they go on a run like they did last year? Probably not.
I
But
hope not.
yeah, but for Florida, you have to get the defense sorted out for sure. Um, and for this next team, LA. By the way, I did not write the first thing. All right, so I did not write the first thing. For anyone wondering, but yeah, they need to get a goalie. Vegas and Edmonton are the top two teams in the Pacific, and you can't have Phoenix Copley as your goalie against them. You had Jonathan Quick in 2022, and you had Cooper Salo last year. It's not good enough. You need an elite goalie. We have Hellebuck on there. We have UC Saros, although UC Saros might be staying. Um, if I'm LA, you try everything to to get Connor Hellebuck. If that means getting rid of Quinton Byfield, you consider it. You have to get out of the West this year, and if you don't, that might cost Rob Blake his job. Probably cost McClellan his job. Um, as well, you might need to add a bottom six forward because Lafreniere might not be NHL ready yet. But if you look at the forecourt itself, it's a pretty good top nine. Even though I think the trade for
Arvidsson.
PLD was a lot. Because I really like Velarde. I really like Iafallo. You can't deny the center court is stacked there. Defensively, Brent Clark should be one of the rookies of the year. He'll get third pair time. Jacob Morvier is a very good, solid third pair guy. Very good in his own zone. But yeah, LA needs to get the goaltending sorted out, and they only have $4.5 million to do it. So they might have to trade away a guy like Arvidsson to clear up some space to go big game hunting.
Yeah, and that's why maybe a guy like Kerfoot, who probably will make around $1.5 to $2 million on his next deal, maybe would have to be your Arvidsson replacement if you're going to invest, maybe $5.5 to $6 million on a Freddie Anderson, because he's a guy who can play anywhere from your second to fourth line. Ideally, not your second, but maybe he's okay on your third or fourth.
Yeah. You
Now
want to talk about
moving on.
Minnesota?
Yeah, I mean Minnesota, and this is what happens when you have a lot of cap penalty, right? Buyout penalties. I mean, Duhaime, they'll bring him back. It won't be too expensive. They gotta bring back Philip Gustafson. There's no question. And so this is gonna be a pretty quiet free agency for them. They're lucky Brock Faber is really good, so they don't have to invest money in a defenseman. But this is just gonna be their team for next year. It's gonna be the same team. They're gonna run it back, but Faber is gonna be full time. They're going to hope Gustafson lives up to the contract extension that we have them giving them, around close to $5 million for 3 years, kind of similar to the Spencer Knight deal. And you just gotta hope that this team's good enough, because you don't really have the cap flexibility to do much else.
No.
That's what happens when you have a bunch of dead cap.
Yeah, which is why I made fun of Detroit today for buying out Yamamoto. Yeah, what a
Yeah.
fleece. But anyways, let's not talk about the Yamamoto trade. Next up, Montreal is over the cap by 1.26 million. They have to extend Newhook. They have to extend Harvey Pinard. Um, and they got a lot of depth on the back end. As you see, Xhaka is scratched, and Weidman is scratched, and Kovacevic is scratched. Um, and guys like Harris is ain't already. Um, Justin
Barron was
Justin?
pretty good. Yeah,
Yeah,
Justin
Barron.
Barron
Sorry.
was pretty good.
I was thinking about Morgan for a second. Is it Morgan?
No, no, Justin,
Yeah.
Justin.
Um, and you have to be cap compliant. So guys like Mike Hoffman, who has I think a year. I want to see he has a
It's his
year left.
last year. I think it's his
Yeah.
last year. Yeah.
So he has a year left on his deal. You can retain 50% and ship him off. Armia makes almost I think 3.5 mil. You need to ship him off probably.
Yeah.
Montreal has a lot of decisions coming up. You have to play the young kids. Um, yeah, it's gonna be tough. We'll see what Ken Hughes has up his sleeve. Hughes, I don't even know, man. Like when Hughes first came to Montreal, he made all these amazing trades at the deadline, and everyone started hyping him up. And then he signed freaking then he drafted Sokowski, then he drafted Reinbach. I don't even know what this dude is at this point. He might be a fraud.
I mean, look. We'll see. Maybe he's just a guy who's good at trades. You know what I mean? And he doesn't know how to make draft picks high in the draft. And
Yeah.
he's got to put the phone away when when his team's drafting. It's like get him out of the room. Get him out of the room. Let the scouts handle this one. Don't let him cook. But I mean, for sure they gotta move one of those big contracts on the blue line. Matheson was actually pretty good for them last year. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably Savard or Edmondson, because Jack Guy was a fan favorite before he got hurt last year. I can't, and Barron had played really well. Gooley played really well. I can't see them being taken out of the lineup. I think Harris deserves a shot in the NHL. And he played some games last year for Montreal too. So one of those two big contracts have to go. I think they might have found their goalie in Montembeault, and he's going to need to get paid eventually. So that means that some of these longer contracts like Dvorak and Anderson, you got to start looking at offers for them. And we keep hearing rumors about Josh Anderson, but if a team's offering you a first round pick, I think Montreal, you just got to take it.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're holding out for. They've been holding out for like 3 years now, and they still haven't gotten the deal that they want. Maybe you're not going to get that deal. So just let him go. Cut the dead. Cut it off. Don't let it drag on for too long. You're already paying Gallagher a ton of money. A lot of these young guys are going to be due for extension soon. Like, let's try to shed some salary, get ahead of the eight ball to put in some kind of terms.
Yeah.
Uh,
Here we have Nashville. Um, a lot of ballsy moves coming from Barry Trotz, I'll say. Um, we have them extending Alex Carrier. Obviously, Cody Glass had a really good year this year for them.
Yeah, around
Um,
40, 45 point pace, I think, in a healthy season.
yeah, and they have a lot of big contracts coming up in the future, so they shouldn't really be spending all their cap space on short term guys. Probably should be saving up so they can pay guys like Novak who's up next year, right?
Yeah.
Just sign valuable contracts because if you look at the team, it's not great. I like I like Yusuf Parson. He had a good rookie year. Tommy Novak, what a revelation. But that bottom six, man. I mean, besides Joachim Kamel and you know Brennan, like it's not good. And even the defense, like McDonough and Barry, maybe like if this is 4 years ago, hell yeah, kick ass second pair. At this point, I mean Barry's a power play specialist third pair guy, and McDonough
Just
really
fell
fell
off
off
a cliff.
here in Nashville, right? So well, it'll be interesting to see what Barry Trotz does tomorrow, and that's all my thoughts on them.
We asked Rossi to take this because he was a Nashville fan, and I don't want to break his heart, but I have a weird feeling with all these cap cutting moves, Trotz might go a little bit crazy in free agency, and there might be some contracts Rossi might not be too happy with.
I had them signing Matt Dumba a few weeks back, and I mean they might need an upgrade on the D zone, so you never know.
You
That's
never
my
know.
off the board prediction. Next up, to New Jersey. I mean, New Jersey needs like if you just look at this team, there's no weakness. They just need to sign a few fourth liners and like extend Kevin Ball. Like it doesn't even have to be the guys we listed. Any fourth liner will do. The one thing we will say though is that if they should probably explore a Hellbuck trade. It's not that Schmidt and Magic are bad, but we both agree that if they can get Connor Hellbuck, if the price isn't too outrageous, they're probably a Stanley Cup favorites.
Yeah. So I mean, look that third line is so filthy. Palat and Holla on the third line, and then to maybe nurture Holtz. And they still have $10 million in cap space. So if they don't end up getting Hallebuck, right, they can go get another middle six forward, and then you just play Holtz on the fourth line, which probably isn't great for his development. But that's a crazy top first three lines.
Yeah.
I'm not sure there's a better top three line in hockey right now.
Oh, definitely not. That's the best top nine in hockey, easy,
Yeah.
easily.
So
So
yeah,
yeah,
not
New
much to say for
Jersey.
New Jersey.
I mean, that's also the best right side defensively in hockey too. So
Yeah. Oh man,
yeah,
I'm scared as a Leafs fan. Now this team, not so scared of. With all due respect
yeah,
to the New York Islanders, I mean, um, Wallstrom, he's been a guy that Islanders fans have hyped up for a pretty long time. At this point, I think he's more of a name value than he is a player. He's not bad, but he's not going to be a guy who a lot of Islanders fans were fretting about a couple years back, going like, oh man, when Wallstrom comes up, he's going to be $5.5 million, $6 million. Nah, he hasn't really performed like it, so we're going to have him taking a little bit under $3 million on a bridge deal. Varlamov's been reported that he's going to come back on a 2-year deal. It's going to cost around $2 million. And then with that in mind, I mean that's half the cap you have available, and maybe a guy like Tarasenko's in play, but I think looking at this team, they might be better off trying to bring back Engvall and Mayfield and kind of run it back with the team they had last year. But if they were to make a big boy move like the Brinkett, a guy like Cizikas probably has to go. Wallstrom probably has to go. We'll talk about that trade more specifically later. But Islanders definitely not a team that's looking that scary right now.
yeah.
And it's just their flexibility is not quite there. The cap flexibility isn't there. So we see them basically bringing back the same team as last season.
Yeah, and they're probably in their first round next. I mean, they wouldn't even make the playoffs if it was for Sorokin. So, yeah, they're just they're just trash.
I
Drop
mean,
them to
I
Detroit.
guess I guess they're just praying that a full season of Horvat and Barzell together could strike some magic because Horvat came and then Barzell got hurt pretty quickly after. So
Yeah,
so maybe that's what they're hoping for. That's why they brought in Engvall to replace Barzell's speed. So maybe they're hoping if they have both of those guys healthy that it'll lead to wins. I'm still kind of skeptical. I'm
No,
me and
I
Shay
don't think.
both me and Shay both believe Horvat's going to regress after a career year.
I mean, he already kind of regressed when he got traded to the Islanders, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's not looking good. It's also not looking good for the other New York team. The right side of BC, Goudreau, Kako, Brodzinski, not Stanley Cup caliber, that's for sure.
Nope.
Condre Miller had a great year. He'll get 4x4. That's pretty fair. Lafreniere, who hasn't really done anything, is that his fault? Maybe not, but he won't get a lot. And they have to bring back one of Tarasenko Kane. Like, you need a legit right winger in that top six. Um, they also need to sign a fourth liner because that fourth liner is so bad. Cooley's probably not even NHL ready yet. And
Probably not.
it says please take Ryan Reeves, but
uh,
I don't know. Yeah, just an hour and a half ago, he's signing in Toronto. Um, also, Austin Watson and Miles Wood. I mean, those could actually be options for the Rangers. They're not good, so they can take them. I don't care. And yeah, it's
please, please, Drury, just overpay for Reeves so that he signs back with you guys and he doesn't consider Toronto anymore. Please, just take all of them. Take all three of them. I don't want any of them near my team. You will hear more about this when we get to Toronto. But please, please, New York, you're my last hope. Just overpay for them, please. I don't want them near my team.
next team
Uh,
Ottawa. Um, for them, it's actually not that bad of a team. Defensively, really good. Um, the Brinkat is definitely gone, so we list some options for them. Potential returns. I think for me, the best one available here is the Carolina one because Drury. I think at this point is more established than the guy like Zadina.
yeah.
They get a first round pick, and Jameson Reeves and Ryan Suzuki have a lot of potential. And also the fit with Carolina makes a lot of sense. We have them re-signing or sorry extending Pinto and Brandstrom, and get some depth scoring wingers. So that fourth line looks a bit better. Something we don't also have. Maybe get another goalie. Forsberg, Sogard, um, definitely not going to be good enough to get you into the playoffs. So maybe they take a stab at Tristan Jarry. They have 17 million cap space. Maybe they can get a guy like Corpusalo. You
Especially if they
know?
don't have to pay DeBrincat, right?
Yeah.
Because they move on from him. I actually kind of like the Islanders trade. I think Wallstrom is still a very good player, and unlike Drury and Zadina, he's been playing in the NHL and he's been playing top 6 minutes. The first is obviously whatever, but I don't even know if New York still has their 2024 first. But I'm also really hot on Calio Delius. You know my opinions from
Oh yeah.
last year's draft. So if they could get him with Wallstrom in at first, I think that's right up there with Drury. But Detroit's the favorite to get him. I think it really just depends how much are they willing to pay because I think they have the most assets, at least compared to the Islanders. Carolina is debatable. It just depends on which team is willing to give more, right?
Yeah. Next up, Philadelphia, who actually has good management now, thankfully for them. For them, we suggest just tearing it down, keep doing what they're doing. Um, we think they can get a king's ransom for connecting two first top prospect in a middle 6-4 that's on a bit of a bad contract. Um, move Scott Lawton. We know teams gave up a first round pick or were offered a first round pick for Lawton. They declined. So maybe if they sweeten out with a prospect, he can get dealt. Try to get a first for Sandheim or a second or whatever you can, even if there's no market. And yeah, just trade, get that D'Angelo off the team ASAP. Like, even if Carolina changes their mind, just trade him, get rid of him. He isn't a fit there. Torts obviously hates him. And yeah, just keep doing what they're doing and trust in the Briere plan.
Oh, and one last note: tighten the security a little bit. All right, I wasted an entire day. I could have been studying for midterms because apparently there was going to be like a huge four-player to trade between
I
you and
know. I
and
was
and
like,
it
lose
just
my
never
phone.
happened.
It never happened.
It just never
Yeah.
happened. So tighten up that security, Danny. You're doing a good job. I believe in you, but come on now.
Uh,
Now to my former GM's new team.
oh, you can talk
Um,
about Pittsburgh. I want to hear this.
all I'm gonna say is Riley Smith for a third round pick. Toronto fans don't know what they had with Kyle Dubas, and we'll get more into this when we get to Toronto with the moves that have been rumored about for living. But you gotta move Granlund off at any cost. And oh my God, look at that, Kyle getting into a job and inheriting a bad contract, like Patrick Marleau, like Mikael Granlund. Oh, not first time happening. Don't worry, he'll get him off, move off that contract. You need the flexibility, and you want to do it to bring back Zucker, who wasn't great 2 years ago, but last season 48 points, quite a good player. And you need the depth scoring. Granlund, Carter, Nylander on that third line is not going to cut it. You want to bring your goalie back. I mean, I think Tristan Jarry is nice because he's kind of got that familiarity with the organization, but his consistency level is probably puts him in line with a guy like Samsonov, which is around like that high 3.8, like 3.8, 4.2 range. I think if he wants anything more than that, you're going to let Jarry walk. I think there's a lot of options in free agency that might be cheaper than that, which include Korpisalo, maybe Samsonov. And then Jeremy Swayman is just if Boston's desperate and they can't clear the cap, and Swayman's a guy that they're not going to be able to extend, him or Allmark could be an option. I think Swayman is obviously someone that Pittsburgh would prefer. He's younger. And sign some depth guys. It could be any of the guys we've mentioned previously on cheap $1/$1.5 million deals, but Hextall just pulled his best Jim Rutherford impression. The cupboard is bare. There is no depth on this team whatsoever, and I mean, hell, they could use someone on the blue line since Dumoulin is leaving. Ty Smith and Pierre Oliver Joseph is a bit dicey for your second and third pair defense on the left side. But yeah, I trust Kyle. I miss him. I wish he were still our general manager. But all the best in Pittsburgh. Go get Crosby that cup. At this point, I hope you win a cup before we do. So just so you can come back and be like, I told you so, Toronto. You guys didn't think I could build a team that could win a cup. Well, look at me, I did it. All right. I love you, Kyle. We didn't deserve you.
All right, San Jose. Not really much to do here in San Jose. They have Zetterlund as an RFA, but the biggest thing here is just get rid of Eric Carlson. His value is never going to be higher. Just won his third Norris Trophy. He's gonna regress next year. Um, they want to retain up to 20. Like no contender's gonna allow that. You have to retain to up to at least 30%. And as for a return, it was rumored that they wanted like three firsts and like a prospect back at the deadline. Just whatever whatever offer you get, I think you just accept it. Because if Carlson starts to regress this year, which he will, guess what? You're stuck with the back contract again, unmovable, and he's on your team for the next 3 years. So just get rid of him.
Yeah, and maybe get a goalie because you only got one under contract right now. But yeah, I mean that's about it. Zerlin's a core piece they got back in the Meyer deal, so I'll probably extend him. And there's not a lot to say with these rebuilding teams, so we'll move on to a team that's definitely not rebuilding.
Yeah. Next up, obviously Seattle. Let go of Donato and Sprung today, and I'm forgetting someone
And
else. And
Geeky,
Geeky, sorry, yes,
and
and
Susie.
Geeky.
Susie's probably gone.
Yeah, and their team is still good, man. Like they have 20 million to work with this year. They have to extend Vincent. 6.5 times 8 is very, very fair. Probably need to sign a left-hand defenseman to replace Carson Soucy, or just any defenseman in general. We have Graves, Dumoulin, Ekman Larson, Hull as examples, cheap options. And they need to get the goalie situation sorted out. I like Grubauer did have a good first round, but he faltered in the second round. And Driggers had so many injury issues, and he's very inconsistent. So just throw a dart on a goalie that's young, cheap, and has upside. Corpusalo comes to mind. Blackwood for like a year at 2 mil. Nedeljkovic, who's good in Carolina, and maybe a guy that doesn't have a lot of NHL experience but has been good in the AHL level, Eric Shalgren. This team is very dangerous offensively. Um, they are good defensively, and they just need the right goalie to carry them through. Um, this team, man, is going to be scary in the future with guys like Goyette coming up and Furcus coming up. They just got Edward Saleh. Uh,
Ty Nelson on the back end, Riker Evans.
yeah,
We haven't even talked about Shane Wright.
yeah, on their fourth line. Probably won't play fourth line, but that's just where we have the lines at right now. It's a good ass team.
Great
I'll
team,
say
great
that.
team. I think you should be scared as an
Oh, I
Edmonton
am scared.
fan.
Their team is just full of finishers, man. That's what
Yeah,
they are. They all can finish. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
good.
still can't believe Nashville waived Tolvanen. What a steal on
So
the waiver
stupid.
wire.
So stupid. St. Louis is up next. Even though they traded Karasenko and O'Reilly at the deadline and the other pieces, their offense is still good. Their top nine, beautiful. You have 3.14 cap in cap to work with. For us, the biggest thing is we said this during the draft stream too. Upgrade your defense, which is why when they took forwards in their first two picks, I was kind of mad. Move one to Letty or Krug and try to offload Scandella too, because that is if you move off from Krug and Scandella, that's almost 8.5 to 9 million cleared off the books. And then if you replace them with one of Scott Mayfield, who's from St. Louis, Nico Mikula, who's played in St. Louis before, Ethan Bear, who's very young and has upside, and Justin Hole, who can stabilize your third pair. Just keep them on.
Don't lie to them, Shay. Don't lie to them,
Just keep
Shay.
them. Just keep
He'll
them.
kill penalties. He'll kill penalties for you. That's what he'll do. He'll kill penalties for you.
But like they need just a change on the D, just one change at least, please. And obviously, I mean you're stuck with Bennington, so I would move off from Bennington, but I don't think anyone wants.
He's got a full no trade clause. They can't move off him. They
Yeah,
literally
so
can't.
they're probably a wild card team, but that's probably about it.
Yeah.
You want to track?
Yes,
You
Tampa.
can do the next two teams.
Tampa,
Okay?
what happened? Tampa quite. This gives me not joy. This gives me so much joy to say Tampa screwed.
Yeah.
After all the cap shenanigans they pull with Brent Seabrook going on LTIR, and oh no, Nikita Kucherov is hurt, and all this BS, it's finally caught up to them, as we knew it always must. The defense is the weakest it's ever looked. With McDonough moving out, and Perbooks and Radish are both fine players, but I think we can both agree that it's, and Vasilevsky is obviously great, but they don't have a backup for him anymore. And then up front, they don't have enough money to sign Janot. Right now, they don't have a full 20-man roster. And so it's it's not looking great for them. Well, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
And so good, but that the 4-6 of that bottom six is not looking great, and you might not be able to bring back Janot. So at this point, like you can't even sign a backup for Vasi right now. Vasi's gonna play 82 games. That's what they're gonna do. They're gonna run an e-bug every single night. They're only gonna dress 17 players, and that's what it's gonna be. Like I mean, we discussed maybe they'll go to Martin Jones like, hey, can you sign like a contract with this team, and then they trade them to us for like 50% retained. But I don't even know if that counts as like cap circumvention. Like, is Tampa even allowed to do that? Like that's a question as well. But they are in cap hell right now, and I couldn't be happier as a Leafs fan. Finally, it's over.
All right. Is that it?
Yeah, and this is my team.
Here we go.
So with this team, I think with the Camp signing especially, we have to sign Middle Six Ford. Otherwise, this team doesn't work if Camp is your actual 3C. We need a guy who can play 3C or move up to the wing if needed. Some guys are like Ryan O'Reilly. We know he works in Toronto. Connor Brown. They said there was a report that said Connor Brown, Toronto and Edmonton were the front runners for Brown. If I'm being honest, he's going to Edmonton. But, I just put him in there because he's a nice pipe dream. I really like Domi's fit. I think he's skilled enough. He has a bit of grit to his game. He's like a poor man's Konechny. He doesn't score nearly as much, but he's a guy who can play second or third line minutes. And JT Compher is a guy I would consider. He's going to be expensive. He's probably going to be north of $5 million, probably north of $5.5 million. But I just think you desperately need a guy that you can plug and play in the middle six that can provide you offense, 50 to 60 points. Because someone's got to replace Michael Bunting's production. And then I think you got to go garbage bin hunting like they do every year with ZAR last season, Bunting the year before that. You got to get some steals. I mean, Yamamoto, Steele, Comtois, Sprong, Jost, White, Gurianov, Paling. These are all RFAs that didn't get qualified. Probably will be less than $2 million. Hope you can bring one or two of those guys in. Maybe one of them, break out and exceed the value that you paid for them. The way Bunting did. I think it's important to bring Shen back. I think he was super good with Morgan Riley. And especially at his cap hit, I don't expect it to be over $2 million. Give him the extra term. He has the passion. Leafs fans love him. Bring him back. Muzzin and Murray have to go. Don't care how you get it done. Muzzin probably won't take much. It's probably like a Shea Weber deal. You add a seventh, you send him to like Arizona or Anaheim, and he can just sit on LTIR for the last year. I think if Samsonov makes less than $4 million in the market, because they qualified him, we know that now. They give him a qualifying offer. If he doesn't find anything great out on the market, and he's willing to take like less than $4 million and more short term, I think you do that. You bring him back. You put him with Wall. That's your goalie going forward. I'm completely sold on Zadorov. I want him on the team. He's the perfect third pair. He's a true living guy, especially at 50% retained. It still maintains flexibility for Toronto. That's my guy. I want him. And speaking of the opposite of that, do not bring back Alex Kerfoot or Justin Hall. Kerfoot I'm partial to if it's like $1 million, but under any circumstance, I do not want to see Justin Hall within 10 meters of Air Canada Center or 10 meters of the GTA. Okay, no, the closest you're allowed to be is Ottawa. Anywhere closer, and we need to deport you from the country. I'm sorry. I don't want him anywhere near my team. And we're hearing reports, and it's gonna happen. And I will rage about this later when we do my prediction for tomorrow. But nah, don't sign Ryan Reeves or Miles Wood, please, Red. It's gonna happen. I know it is, but I can dream that it doesn't, and it breaks my heart that it won't. So that's enough about Toronto. Let's move on.
Okay. Vancouver is up next, and I feel like every year the Canucks are like major players to free agency and they always do the stupidest things ever. 2016 they signed Erickson. 2017 they signed Gagne to like a 3x3 that didn't pan out. Then 2018 they signed Roussel and Beagle to 3 million contracts, 3 million AAV by 4 years. Uh, um, 2020, I think they gave out the Braden Holtby contract. 2019, they gave out the Tyler Myers contract. 2021, they did the OEL trade. You see, there's a pattern that every year they do something stupid, and they're gonna do it again. They're gonna give Ian Cole apparently 4 years, and like I don't know how old is Cole. He's 34, so he's gonna be like 38 when that ends. Um, he's already only a third pair defenseman, and yes, I know you have to upgrade your left side. Susie and Cole, sure. They're upgrades, but you don't give Ian Cole 4 years. Hopefully that happens tomorrow because I'll laugh out loud during the live stream. You have to move on from Garland. It's not that he's a bad player. It's just that if you want to sign Cole and Susie, you're not gonna have enough cap space. So you move Garland to get the cap space. You can move him for whatever, and also sign a third pair defenseman. We already talked about Simon Benoit. Cal Foot's an interesting option. Imagine a third pair of Holt and Cole.
Oh,
Amazing. This team is like they're just mid. Like the top.
They're one of the teams in the National Hockey
League. Yep. They're gonna get like 90 points like they do every year and miss out the playoffs by 4. They're not gonna make the playoffs, especially in the Pacific Division, which I think is kind of underrated now. You have the Oilers, you have the Golden Knights that just won. The Kings are good, and Seattle's amazing. The Ducks are up and coming. The Pacific Division is pretty good. I am just gonna say that right now. I don't think it's one of the weakest in hockey.
And I'm not gonna lie, the parallels between Edmonton and Toronto are just increasing because especially from like a Canadian perspective, Montreal is dog crap. Winnipeg is going into the shitter, and Ottawa is kind of middling, and then obviously Calgary is going up in flames, like quite literally, and Vancouver is Vancouver. So not a lot of it's like the two really shining beacons of hope for a Stanley Cup in the next 3 years is really resting between these two teams.
Yeah.
Edmonton and Toronto. So feels good, and also feels bad, as you'll find out in a couple minutes.
We'll do Vegas pretty quickly. I mean, they're over the cap as they usually are. Just get rid of Leonard's contract, and he'll probably play somewhere else. Hill and Thompson, obviously, your goalies. I don't like the Hill contract, by the way. I think you overpaid based on a playoff run. Um, Obviously, you trade away Riley Smith, so find a player that can replace him for cheap. Anderson Dolan's a new name he added, so is Jesper Bockquist. Out of all these guys, I would think a guy like Dennis Gurianov best fits Vegas, just speed and scoring in the bottom six. And I think he'd be a decent fit with William Karlsson. Obviously, their defense is unchanged. Maybe Dorotheev gets a longer look there. He looked good in spurts this season. But yeah, not really a lot of change for the Cup champs besides Riley Smith.
So, right?
Is that it? I think that's it for Vegas.
Washington and Winnipeg. We got Washington and Winnipeg, and then we're done the team.
Yeah.
Washington, they've been saying they're gonna dump Mantha for a while now. Dump him, then go and do what you did last year with Strome and Milano. Go find guys who didn't get qualified that have good value. See the list that we did for Vegas, and then bring back Fair Harvey, who's probably your third best defenseman from last season. With Orlov gone, obviously. And I mean that's it. I mean, with only $7 million cap space, and I don't expect them to be too active. I think it might take them a while to dump Mantha, so I think that'll limit what they can do in the first day of free agency. But maybe McMichael and Lapierre also get a more extended look. With guys like Oshie probably regressing and dropping off.
All right, you want to touch on Winnipeg too, because I know you really hate Winnipeg.
I don't like Winnipeg, but still can't believe what they managed to get for PLD. I really thought that they were about to lose him for close to nothing, but somehow they got Velarde, who I thought his contract might be a bit more, but Shea convinced me. He was like, he's only had one good season. He's been dealing with injury issues. They're gonna bring back Morgan Barron, who's been pretty good for them. Kapari was a fourth liner, but young. Sandberg will get the Liljegren extension. The big thing is, a lot of guys want out on the last year of their deal. Move them out. They're waiving Wheeler already. Move Scheifele for whatever pick or prospect you can get. I personally don't think his value is that high. And then try to get a haul for Hellebuyck. We mentioned that New Jersey should try to get him if the price is not outrageous. If you're Winnipeg, you gotta demand an outrageous price. And you want a young goalie back, because you don't really have one in the pipeline. You want it to start with 2 first-round picks. You want a top prospect. And with Scheifele going out, you might want a young center back that could, play in the NHL this season. And then, Heinola's been buried, man. He's such a good player, but there just hasn't been room for him in the NHL. Get rid of one of Dillon or Schmidt so this guy can finally play consistent minutes. And maybe get a backup goalie, too.
All right. So here, like we said, we have our projected teams, and for the Oilers, I basically did what I said that you should do. Obviously, Bouchard, Bridge, McLeod, Bridge, Lavoie re-signed. I think Brown gets a 1x1 with bonuses, and I think they bring home a kid in Sam Steele who was okay in Minnesota. Obviously, didn't get his qualified offer. I mean, you look at the lineup, very solid top 12 for the Oilers. Obviously, defense definitely needs some work, but I think they can improve on that at the deadline. You have $200K in cap space, and of course, since it's the first year, this is the first time since the 18-19 season that they aren't operating in LTIR, so they can actually accumulate cap space as the season goes on, which is very refreshing. 5 years, all right. No more money in, money out. It's amazing. I love it. And I absolutely love the Steele Ryan Lavoie line. Ryan, obviously, a great two-way player. Lavoie, as a rookie, kind of replaces Clean Costin, big physical presence. And Steele has a lot of skill. I know he'd be excited to sign with his hometown team. I really like this lineup. Broberg obviously scratched. They re-signed Jan Marte. I think he can come in for Steele or Lavoie sometimes. Just to shake up the lineup on a game-by-game basis. I really like this team for the Oilers.
I mean that probably. I don't know if it would be up there with Vegas just because Vegas' defense is so good, but I mean just off of McDavid and Draisaitl, I mean Edmonton's gonna have a shot every night with that, and with a solid supporting cast around them too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like this. I like this a lot. For Toronto, I feel around with this a bit. I ended up deciding on Domi, who I like a lot. I think Abruzzese gets an extension. They qualified him. Don't see a reason why he wouldn't be back. I'm going to leave the next guy on the list till last. I like Comtois' fit as a potential kind of Michael Bunting replacement. A bit of an agitator, a bit of an annoying guy. A bigger player than Bunting, probably a bit more physical. Still super young. I think he has some untapped upside. The Samsonov extension, which is like I mentioned, I don't think he's going to get what he's looking for in terms of term and money on the open market. So I think he's going to come back. He's going to sign that shorter term deal. It's going to be a lower cap hit. I ended up selling on Daniel Sprong because he was super productive for Seattle in the fourth line role. And we kind of pitch him like, hey, play with us here for 2 years. You're going to play in the top six. You're going to have Nylander and Tavares or Matthews and Marner to play with. You're going to put up gaudy numbers. And, look at other guys who have signed here. Bunting's going to get paid. Mikheyev got paid, right? So you come here, you play well, you get paid for it later. And you have a chance to, play meaningful minutes. Luke Shen, I mentioned I want back on a 2x2. And then I think you're going to move Timmins, who's making 1.1, to Calgary because, he might be a guy who fights for playing time and might actually want to stay in Calgary. I think he still has some untapped potential, and there's going to be prospects and picks for Zadorov at 50% retained. So that rounds out your defense because I think at this point, Gio's either going to retire or, even if he doesn't, I don't think he's fit to play 82 games plus a playoff run. So having him as the seventh defenseman makes more sense to me. Last but not least, I have them signing Ryan Reeves. Not because I want to, but because I know it's happening. The reports are he's going to sign a multi-year deal. I pray that it's the lowest possible multi-year deal, which is 2 years. And Lord help me, if they give this guy more than $2 million, I am going to lose it tomorrow. The entire city of Waterloo will hear me. Doesn't provide any value. He's a 36-year-old who only hits and plays like 8 minutes a night. I went on this spiel with Shea earlier, but I hear reports. It's like, oh, the Leafs and Nylander far apart on extension. So let's just say the Leafs are at 8.5 and Nylander's at 9.5. If you just give like a random fourth line plug $1 million, he basically does what Reeves does outside. Like he maybe just doesn't hit as much, maybe he doesn't punch as many guys, right? You only pay $1 million. The extra $750K. What happens when you add that $750K in cap to the 8.5 you're originally willing to give Nylander? Guess what? That goes from 8.5 to 9.25. Now all of a sudden you're not so far off from what Nylander wants, right? I mean, if Nylander wants $10 million, then well, damn, he's gone, okay? But I don't think he wants to. I think he's around at 9.5. And I swear to God, if the Ryan Reeves contract is the reason we end up not signing William Nylander and we have to end up trading him for like cents on the dollar, I'm going to lose it. I'm going to lose it on this team. I'm going to lose it on this general manager. We cannot afford to spend $4.5 million on our fourth line. No, not even for our fourth line, for 2/3 of our fourth line, all right? Because that's just Camp and Reeves, right? And if Jad laughs at that, we're going to spend $6 million. Dubas is turning in his Leafs grave. He never, even at his worst, will you ever consider signing a fourth line to like $7 million on purpose, right? If you sign like a guy that's meant to be on your third line and he doesn't play well and then he ends up being on your fourth line, that's still semi-acceptable. Because like at least like the intention was we're signing a guy with skill who can play in our middle six, right? There's no upside with Reeves. We know what he is. He's a fourth line goon. He punches people, he hits people, and he fucks off to the penalty box. That's what he does. That's his entire game. All right, I get it. I get we need some toughness. I get Troy Living likes his toughness. But like of all the things the Leafs have to worry about, goaltending, improving the defense, middle six production offense, Matthews extension, Nylander's extension, Marner's extension. What is the one concrete news we've gotten in the last 36 hours since the draft? The Leafs really want Ryan Reeves. They're making a concerted effort to sign Ryan Reeves. Because that's what this team needs. That's what this team needs. A guy who can punch and play 8 minutes and not score. We had those guys. We had Luke Shen. You want a guy who gets over 100 hits in a season at forward? Noah Chari was top 10 hits for forwards last season, okay? We had that guy, okay? You know why we lost against Florida? You know why we lost? It's because the moment
the moment the Top Guns stopped scoring goals, we were screwed. Right? So what do we do? Let's see how many goals did Ryan Reeves have in his career high in an 80-game season. 9 goals. 9 goals. How many points did he score in the playoffs? This man has 5 times the penalty minutes than points in the playoffs. Like what? If you think Michael Bunting is bad, oh my God, Ryan Reeves is gonna spend 10. He's gonna spend more time in the penalty box than on the ice. He's gonna get a 10-minute major every other game. And he only plays 8 minutes a night. There's no. The grass is not always greener, guys. I went on this rant with Shay earlier. I don't want to drag on this thing for too long, but like, man, I miss Kyle Dubas, man. It's moments like this where I really miss that guy. And watch, it's not just gonna be Reeves. I think I signed Austin Watson to a 2-year, $1.5 million deal. And if that happens, I give up. I'm not. I don't. If that happens, like, I'm gonna have to start questioning, like, if I really even like this sport that much, man. Like, maybe hockey's not for me. Maybe I chose the wrong sport to watch. Because like that shit just gonna be crazy, man. How am I supposed to watch a fourth line of Ryan Reeves, David Kampf, and Austin Watson? We tried that in 2013. We had Cole Noor and Fraser McLaren between Jay McClement. Okay, we had the fourth line guy who only takes faceoffs and plays defense, and then 2 goons on his line. Okay, it didn't work. We were good for 1 season, and it was a short lockout season, and we lost to Boston, and then we were absolute dog crap after. And guess what happened? We had to rebuild. We traded everybody, and then we had to tank. All right, I do not want this to go full circle. Right? If I see that line again, I'm gonna lose it, man. I can't be a Leafs fan anymore if that happens. There's no way. All right, we are not. If after the first day of free agency, I see that we only signed 2 goons, I don't even know what I'm gonna say. Like that honestly might be worse than bringing back Justin Hall and Alex Kerfoot. I would rather have Kerfoot and Hall back than Reeves and Austin Watson. So Brad, I know you're not listening. I know, because if you've been listening to Leafs fans, you would have known since the day you took this job that Reeves and Austin Watson were not the answer. All right, you're not listening, bro. You're not listening, man. Like, we need scoring, man. That's what all these fans have been talking about since the playoffs. We need someone to put the puck in the net, all right? Because guess what? The guys we pay $11 million a year to, and Austin Matthews, and Mitch Marner, and John Tavares can't put the puck in the net against Bobrovsky, okay? Like, they can't do it. So we need someone else. We need someone else that can do it, all right? And the answer is not goddamn Ryan Reeves and Austin Watson, all right? Austin Matthews has more goals in 1 season than these guys combined have had in their entire career, all right? Alex Kerfoot has scored more in his career than both of them combined, all right? Alex Kerfoot at his height probably scored more than them in his 1 season at Harvard, all right? I can't do this anymore, man. I can't. I'm sorry.
Nice little rant by Ryan there. And it's probably gonna come out again when they do give out those contracts tomorrow. So we'll see what happens. Any final thoughts for tomorrow? Not just on the Leafs, obviously, but just in general.
I hope Boston and
Tampa. Yeah, it'll be fun to see what happens tomorrow. Friedman just released an article. There's some juicy tidbits in there. Apparently, Cam Talbot might go to LA. That still doesn't fix their goalie situation. But yeah, free agency in the off season technically begins tomorrow. We're gonna see a lot of overpays as per usual. But yeah, we wanted to give our thoughts and on what teams might be doing. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you on July 1st.